Hello and welcome to Radio Waves, a production of Red Apples Media. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and we're broadcasting out of WLBE-790 AM out of Leesburg, Florida. And I'd also like to welcome our viewers on Lake Sumter Television. If you're watching this, you're watching us on Comcast Channel 13, Bright House Channel 498, and CenturyLink Prism Channel 83. So today we'll be speaking with Dr. Susan Moxley, the Superintendent of Lake County Schools. She's been superintendent for 9 years now and is approaching her retirement. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges she's faced and some of the hopes and things that she has for the new superintendent coming in. So with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Moxley. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
Good. So tell us a little bit about the role of superintendent.
The role of the superintendent is to be basically the CEO of Lake County Schools, and we have, about 48 schools in our district and several ancillary facilities that are the operations. And so we see all aspects of our organization, primarily education, but we have a lot of other things: food service, transportation. We have a large maintenance and facilities department. So it covers a wide array of aspects in our organization.
And you have to oversee in one way, shape, or form all of that, correct?
That is correct. I do have a wonderful executive cabinet, which has a chief over each division, and then we have staff in each of those departments, as well as each school. It has school-based staff.
Okay. Now, for our listeners, and myself included, who do you work for? In the higher, do you work for the board, the teachers, the students, the county?
Well, that's an interesting question. Actually, as an appointed superintendent, I report to the board as they hire the superintendent. I do serve the students of Lake County. I serve the parents of Lake County, and I serve really everyone in Lake County, because schools are the heart of our community.
Oh, of course, of course. And now you were appointed, and you were like the last or the first one in 30, 40 years or so?
Correct.
How do you feel about that? Because I, as a parent, I don't know, I'm kind of torn. On one hand, you have the people who do the appointing. Well, this is their realm. They know. They know the candidates, their history. But on the other hand, it's like, where's my voice? I'm a parent. Or is there just too many moving parts and it's easier just to appoint?
I think there's been a lot of discussion about that over the years, and across the country, you will see a lot of appointed superintendents. In Florida, though, there's only about 24, 25 of us that are appointed. The rest are elected out of 67 districts. So in Florida, there's a mixture of that. And I think when you see a smaller districts, you will see that elected superintendent, and your larger districts, because of the complexity of the organization, they wanted to have an appointed superintendent. I think it gets into credentialing and those kinds of things. But I believe in Lake County, that's been discussed over the years. The residents of Lake County do have a voice in this, because you elect a school board, and the school board, when they are hiring a superintendent, does a lot of community outreach, and they do want to hear from the public, and they are responsive to the public. So I think the governance model can work very well. And
that's a very good point, because the people who are doing the appointing are elected officials. Okay, make a little more sense. During your tenure, like any job, but I would imagine the superintendent of schools, you've probably faced quite a few different challenges. During your tenure, what challenges have you gotten past, and which ones do you foresee coming down the road?
When I came on board in 2008, I think if everyone remembers, the economy changed drastically after 2008. And we had that drastic downturn. And we are still really recovering from that. So immediately out of the gate, once I took the office of the superintendency, the board at the time and I were faced with making some pretty massive cuts to the school budget. In fact, if my memory serves me right, it was almost like $13 million that first year we had to cut out of our budget. And
that's just the first year.
That was the first year. That was very, very challenging because we had so many things we wanted to do for children and to provide those educational opportunities, and it was a real struggle. And I have to commend our Lake County community because everybody came to the plate and said, you know what, we will be as frugal as we needed to be, we will cut the frills, and we will make sure that we maintain quality education. But that was a challenge. That has continued to be a challenge. I have to tell you that over the course of my 8.5 years, the financial picture has been a challenge because we've had to recover, and we just didn't turn that around across the country, and Florida's no different, very quickly.
Right.
And on top of that, that put a real challenge on our capital budget. So going forward, the capital budget continues to be a real challenge that the current board and the new superintendent will be wrestling with for the years ahead.
And do you think there's any light at the end of the tunnel? I mean, are we consistently losing money towards schools? Or are we gaining? Or is it a little bit this year, a little bit that year? Because I would imagine that either way, you need a certain amount of growth. Now, I understand responsible spending, but our communities are getting larger, which means we need more. There's more demand for school, and there's going to be more demand for supplies, facilities, employees, labor, etc.
You raise very good points, and those all are factors that we have to look at. And so when you think about the operational budget, while we've recovered over the years, and the problem that you get is when you come back to the levels where you were, we also have increased in student enrollment. So you do get more students. On the capital side of the house, with our resources for maintenance, repair, building new schools, that hasn't recovered to the level that we need to. It has not recovered to the level that we've had to. And that is a conversation that we certainly are having in Tallahassee because of the fact that we need to build some new schools to accommodate the growth so that we can address the overcrowding in some of our schools right now. We are seeing growth come back in the south end of our county. It kind of slowed a little bit. It never really stopped, but it is back very rapidly. The other area we're seeing high growth is in the eastern part of our county, in the Mount Dora Sorrento area. That interchange is going in, and we're starting to see subdivisions that may have been paused. They're now completed, and that does present a challenge. And so our board has been very fiscally responsible. One of the things that we've done over the past 3 years is we took our bonds and we refinanced them. And we refinanced them in such a way that we got lower interest rates. So over the past 3 years, we were able to redeploy or recover $20 million back into the capital fund that is reduced interest payments we would have been making, but because we refinanced, that's future interest we will not have to pay. So
that's amazing.
Right. So we really
that's a lot of money. I mean,
that is.
I think everybody can appreciate
that.
20,
That goes a long way to building an elementary school. And I think that those have been the strategies over the course of the past 8 years we have done to say we need to learn to live within our means, not because, well, in addition to that being the right thing to do, but we also are forced to do that. You have to make it's responsible resourcing.
And you've been recognized nationally for smart spending, correct?
We are. So several years ago, it's been probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when the economy wasn't recovering at the rapid pace we needed to, we realized we need to do business differently, and we need to operate very strategically, and we needed to have a strategic finance plan that allowed us to look for efficiencies so that we could take money and redeploy it into priorities that would advance the classroom and would go in and touch students. And so we actually applied for a grant, which was the Smarter School Spending Grant, and we worked with professional partners that came in that did this work. And Fortune 500 companies use these firms to come in and help them strategize. We received a grant to have that kind of expertise come and work with us over 18 months to put together a system and a process. And so we were one of 4 districts in the country to get the grant. As of right now, our district has been used as a model for other districts, and the Government Finance Officers Association, they are actually using our model to share with other entities as being best practice.
How is this trickling down to the schools themselves and the students? Back in my day when I was going to school, we started getting more students, so we started getting more trailers or the standalones outside. Does that affect the actual education of the students? Have you seen any issues with the schools and the education themselves due to the money issues that we're facing or were facing?
Right. With the strategic finance plan, that was focused on operation dollars. And so what it did is it built a system for you to constantly or continually look for efficiencies. That's built in. So, the efficiencies may change because as you achieve those efficiencies, then you go and look for more efficiencies. And how can you streamline and make that dollar get spent in the best way possible? So it's a system. The priorities will change. So when we started this, 3 or 4 years ago, we had certain priorities. We wanted to put in place a talent development pipeline to address teacher compensation and to have a recruitment tool for that. We wanted to address classroom practices for students and to provide those opportunities. That's where the personalized learning for students came. That's where personalized learning for teachers and leaders came from. And so the monies were deployed into kicking off those programs. And we did that in combination with other grant dollars. But by the same token, those priorities will change because as you implement things, the board will establish new priorities. And so it's a fluid process. So I was all about building a system and a process because I knew that priorities would change over the years.
As they do.
Yes.
And that's with any industry, any government office. Now, you spoke about personalized learning. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for our listeners?
Sure. Personalized learning is a delivery model where teachers and students are able to look at pathways for students where students are owning their own learning. The teachers, they're working alongside the student, and the student has some choice in the way they demonstrate their proficiency of the skill or the standard, and how they go about learning that material, because everybody has a different learning style. You may be more auditory, I may be more kinesthetic. And so the bottom line is we want all students to master the standards because they want to graduate and go out and be gainfully employed and productive citizens. So we feel that students need to own their learning, they need to be partners in that, and they need to have the ability to have a multiple pathway on how they demonstrate that.
Okay. Well, we need to take a break, but when we return, we'll continue our conversation with Dr. Susan Moxley, Superintendent of Lake County Schools. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Radio Waves. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and we're talking with Dr. Susan Moxley, Superintendent of Lake County Schools. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about money and the finances and some of the programs that she's oversaw to get us to where we're at now. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about the personalized learning. And are you seeing a positive result of that in the schools?
Sure. I think that's still fairly new, and we are phasing that in. And so the schools that have rolled that out, they are kind of still in that beginning stage. In some schools, they are starting to see a return on that investment. Other schools are still brand new in that, and so I think we need to see that unfold here after they've had a little bit more time. As with anything new, the first time you attempt something new, you do that crawl, walk, run
Right.
kind of
it's like, oh yeah,
scenario.
wait.
Yeah.
Let's.
And I think that, like I said, the schools that are really they've had time to get in and really work at it, they're seeing that positive return on that. And so I think time will tell on that. And I think it's very important for us whenever we roll out something new. And we have several other programs that I think we've done the same thing with. We're seeing that when you have to have a quality control piece to that you
Of
make
course.
sure that whatever you do, that you are doing it with the highest quality and fidelity of implementation, because if you don't, then you're not going to see the results. So you always want to have that monitoring piece to make sure that everything is that high quality.
Oh, of course. Otherwise, how else do you know if it's working or
Right.
not working?
Right.
And
Right.
how good on either side of that?
Right.
Now, a topic near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure it is to most parents and clearly most students. Testing. What are your feelings? How do you feel about the amount of testing that our students are undergoing now? And then I'll let you know how I feel about it, because I have a son who's currently still in school, and it does seem like the testing has grown exponentially. And I myself, and I'm sure many of our listeners, are a little concerned that it might detract from the education that the students should be getting, at no fault to the education systems, the teachers, this individual schools.
Plain and simple, there's way too much testing. I mean, there
Okay.
just is way,
I didn't want to call you out.
way-
I was
no.
about to, because it's ridiculous.
There's way too much testing. And I think the important thing is there is a purpose to assess students. And as a teacher, we need to know where our students are at different points in time. So I think it's important to establish what's the purpose of the test and why are we doing that. But I think it's gotten way out of whack, if you will, in how much our students are being tested. And we are very concerned about that. I think when I reflect back on my tenure here as superintendent, where I saw a real shift in the increase of that is when it got linked to the teacher's evaluation system. So because that
Okay.
became a required or a statutory requirement for every teacher in our system, part of their evaluation had to be linked to an assessment of students. We're assessing students, or forced to assess students, in ways that we probably would not have really done that. I mean, all the way from kindergarten up, because the teacher had to be assessed, had their evaluation was based on an assessment piece of the students that they taught.
But teachers need to be assessed. At some
Absolutely.
point,
Absolutely.
Right? So how was it done prior?
It
Was it better or worse than what
Sure.
it is now?
There is an evaluation system, and a very comprehensive evaluation system. And so now we have a system called VAM, where a test score, and the problem is that there is a state assessment that is for grades 3 through 10, and then there's other assessments that you have to use for the other grade levels. We use advanced placement for teachers that are in the high school, but when you get into kindergarten, first and second grade, there isn't a state assessment. So you have to determine what is the standardized test you're going to use for teachers. And so you get to a point where we're just over testing, and that's when people get afraid that all we need to do is teach to the test. And there's so much more in a classroom where teachers, they're experts in their field. They are good at what they do, and they know how to assess their children. Our teachers know where their students are in the classroom throughout the year.
And I believe that too. They're with the student every day. And for me, it seems like we may be binding them down, binding their hands together, because, well, no, I have to focus on. And honestly, doctor, I don't know how many tests are out there, but I know that there's standards from the federal level, state, county, for all I know, individual schools, and then the poor students still have to be tested based on the material that the teachers want them to learn. And I know in the perfect world, it should all equal the same thing. But my concern, and I'm sure many other parents, that you coined it, or you said the phrase, we may be teaching to the test, and not necessarily Lake County, state of Florida, or even the East Coast for that matter, but it's a genuine concern because the teachers are getting graded at this point. Or am I looking at it at a different...
Well, I think it's a lot more than that. I think how we've tried to address that, because we want to minimize the factor that students are tested excessively. We want to minimize that. So we're very careful to look at what is the purpose of the test, what do we have to do that's required by law. And so in the state of Florida, we have the Florida standards. And so when the teachers teach the curriculum, the standards. And I support standards. We need rigorous standards because our students need to be competitive out in the workplace. And our employers and they want to have people that are ready to be employed and skilled. And so I think it's important that we don't lose sight that standards and standards-based instruction is what is being taught in our schools. And our teachers are doing that, and they're doing that proficiently. And so the tests that we give the students need to be testing students on the standards which are taught in the classrooms. So that all should be aligned. The materials that we use, everything we ask the students to do day in and day out should be supported by those standards.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And do you think that the community's perception of this is good or bad versus the actual reality of it?
Sure. I think the standards are working. I think we are changing, and we've had, during the course of my tenure, I think we've had 3 or 4 sets of standards. They've changed over the years. Same. And I think we finally have gotten to a point where we have a set of standards, and we they're in place, and we're learning that. And I hope in the future they're not planning to change, because that constant change with new standards every other year has become problematic. So consistency is important. I do think the amount of testing needs to be looked at, particularly in our younger grades as well.
I see a lot of challenges in the school systems. Everything from new technology, social media, dress codes, the clothing that the students wear to school. That's got to have made your job harder. It's just had to. Because as soon as something happens at a school or something like, it's on social media immediately, that fast. Did you find yourself ever having to contend or compete with that type of issue?
Certainly, social media has added a different dynamic to how we operate. And I think in some ways it's good, and in some ways it's presented a challenge. Social media has allowed us to get access to parents and to the community and be much more transparent, which we need to be and want to be. Social media has allowed us to reach people when they couldn't come to the schoolhouse. They still can be involved. Even though they may not physically be there, they can be present through social media. And we have really embraced and value our parent participation that way. Okay. On the flip side of it, though, however, is that when you have a crisis that involves safety and security, it can be a help because you can get word out to people to help get information and to keep people in the loop, if you will, on the dynamics of what's happening, because people want to be informed. Sure. But the same token, it can also, if misinformation gets out there, it spreads much quicker at a much more rapid pace, and it's harder to get ahead of misinformation with social media. And that is definitely a challenge. And when it comes to school safety, we definitely want to be ahead of things. And we know a lot of times we do monitor social media very carefully, because that's a lot of times where things, the chatter starts. Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, Dr. Moxley, thank you so much for your time. That's all the time we have for today, but thank you for coming on to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
And that's it for Radio Waves. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin. We'll see you next time.